If you're having any difficulties accessing anything in this video tutorial, please contact our help desk by email at aoe.gmshelp@vermont.gov or by phone at 802-479-1044. We will help you find alternative means to access this information. If you are looking for more information on accessing the GMS platform, please see the GMS user manual located in the training section of the GMS landing page. For the completion of the IDEA Consolidated Grant Application within the new grants management system for the Agency of Education. We're going to do an expedited training here based on the training session that was conducted via a webinar on May 15th, 2018. And so we're going to go through the process of completing an application, an IDEA application in the GMS here. Right now we're looking at the production logon page. I'm going to change the resolution a little bit there, make that a little larger. Most of you are familiar with the process for logging on, user ID, password. If you're a new user, if you forgot your password, there are links down here for how to log in, how to complete central data, continuous improvement plans, and other grant programs. We'll be adding the IDEA training link here in this training section sometime during the week of June the 4th. Okay, so I'm going to switch into the test environment to show an example of completing a grant in test. Again, those of you that do have credentials for the test environment, please make sure you don't enter your applications in test, as we will not be able to review those there. As I log into the system, clicking on the GMS Access Select link, I have multiple districts that this ID is associated with, and I picked on one of those, Windham Central, which we're going to use as an example here in this training session. So for FY19, you'll see in the created section there's central data. They have some continuous improvement plans. They're working on their CFP. And some of the other grants that are getting ready to come online, IDEA Consolidated is already online. Their applications are due to the agency by July the 1st. So when I go ahead and click the Create button, the application will open up, and thereafter it will be in the Created section. If I click the link on the top right here that says Go Back to Access Select, you'll notice now that IDEA is listed in the Created section of Formula Grants. And I can re-click on the Open box, and it brings up the tab strip. Again, each of these tabs represents a different web page that needs to be reviewed and in most cases completed prior to the completion and submission of your IDEA Consolidated application. As with almost every application, there's a basic overview page or general information page that talks about what is this grant, what's the legislation that enacted it, where's some guidance from federal or state websites, and if you have any questions, whom you should call or email regarding completing the application. Contact information page, again, at the top of this, if you want to receive notifications about your approval or a return for changes of your application, check that checkbox and add a email address in here. And obviously this isn't a real email address, but the point is you could put the person who entered the information, because the system will automatically email only the person who submitted the application, and in the case of Vermont, that's the superintendent. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to enter a little bit of information in here. I'm going to say John Smith at 123 Main Street was the authorized representative for this particular LEA. I'll go ahead and pick some previously filled out information here. Fields that have asterisks next to them are indeed required. And the reason that these fields are all jammed together is because I've changed the browser resolution to make this a little bit more workable for a training session. You got to put in valid information here. Again, so we need the superintendent's name, the fiscal contact, typically your business manager contact, information about their address as well. And I'm clicking in all these fields here just to show and to illustrate that this is what we'll need to complete before we submit the application. Fax number is not required. And then if there's an IDEA coordinator at your district, that would be good information to put in here. Well, it's required to put in here. Otherwise, you can put in the name of whomever is responsible for special education within your district there. So I'm just going to finish that, and I'm going to click Save Page. Now all that information has been completed. If I had skipped a mandatory field, like I'm going to blank that out and hit Save, it'll give me a warning message saying, hey, we didn't save that because all the fields with an asterisk are required. And so I have to make sure I fill out everything before I leave the page, resolve any error messages before I move on. Next tab over is the Allocations tab. This is where we talk about how much do we have in funding for IDEA Basic and how much do we have for IDEA Preschool. These are actual numbers that are loaded into the test and production system at this time. When we did this training webinar on May 15th, those numbers were not yet known, but they were loaded into the system, I believe, on May 21st. So the current year allocation for this district for IDEA Basic is about $287,000. They have $20,000 in preschool money. There is currently no prior year money loaded into the system. When the unawarded or unexpended from last year becomes available, it will start displaying in this field here. If you have not yet submitted your original application, then you can simply revise that original application to include those additional funds. If your original application is already in the submission and review process, it'll take an amendment after that original application has been approved to incorporate those additional prior year funding. So ultimately, we get to the point where we've got $287,000 available in basic and $20,000 available in post-secondary here. All right, so I'm going to switch over into the next web page because this section is designed to tell you how much do you have in funding. I glossed over the fact that there are these columns over here for proportionate share. Proportionate share's purpose in life is to keep track of the funds that are owed due to equitable share requirements for independent schools. For example, just for argument's sake, let's say that this particular SU has 2% of their students attends independent schools. During the training of the webinar on May 15th, I made an incorrect statement about the way that you need to count the number of students attending independent schools. The rules have not changed from prior years. It's still the same process for computing how many independent school students do you need to provide services for. And down here on this page, there's a section that you're able to move from the basic portion from $287,000 into the proportionate share amount for that program. And I'll step through that example here right now. We're going to go into the next tab, which is for the IDEA basic portion, what is the independent schools count? And so the system knows that we've got $287,000 here, but it doesn't know what our enrollment number is. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that we have, I mentioned 2%. So I'm going to say 980 kids go to the public schools and 20 go to independent schools. Now, when I come down and I hit calculate totals, the system says, okay, fine, you have 1,000 kids, your allocation is $287,000, and then it asks, do you want to spend any of your money on early intervening services up to a maximum of 15% of your Part B allocation? So I could say, sure, I want to put $20,000 or $30,000 to early intervening because that's not subject to the independent schools reservation. So when I hit calculate totals again, now it says, okay, fine, $257,000 is left. And since you have 1,000 kids, that means the per pupil amount is $257. You said that there were 20 kids at independent schools, so 20 kids at the independent schools times $257 per student means $5,140 needs to be reserved for proportionate share. So I'm actually going to copy and paste that number, that 5140 number, and come back into the allocations page and enter that into this from IDEA Basic into the proportionate share for IDEA Basic and hit Save Page. What that does, nope, I didn't have that actually saved yet. My mistake. Let me go back and do that again. What that's actually going to do is allow us to complete the budgeting process for the $5,000 of independent school students and keep track of those funds distinctly to make sure that we've actually expended those dollars for for independent school services. So calculate totals again, get back to the same number that I had, save that page. I'm going to go ahead and enter that there is indeed an independent school, Regions Independent School, 1235 Main Street. You can add multiple independent schools if need be. Now that I've saved that number, I've got $5,140 out there. Come back to the allocations page and type in that 5140.80. Could have copied and pasted as well. Now that's saved correctly. And it reflects the fact that $5,000 just left the IDEA Basic portion and is in the proportionate share for IDEA Basic in the separate budget category. We're going to do the exact same thing for preschool here. I come back over to the IDEA pre-K, and I'm going to say the number of eligible children with disabilities based on my most recent census. I'm just going to say 100. Actually, I'll go ahead and say there's 98 and there's 2. And the total number, go ahead and it'll do the math. We don't have the same early intervening question on this page, and it figures out that you've got to do $400 worth of proportionate share funds for pre-K. Keep in mind, calculate totals does not do a save. You actually have to hit the save page button. So I come back over to the allocations page, and I'm going to transfer $400 over here. Click on Save Page, and now that money's similarly been moved over. I only have $19,600 left in pre-K, and the $5,000 was taken out of basic. With that equitable share information taken care of and the transfers done, we move into the work plan strategies. This is where there are 4 different sub-tabs here, work plan page 1 through work plan page 4, where you can define the strategies that you want to use in your district related to how you're spending your IDEA dollars. You can select a work plan strategy from the drop-down list. You must select at least 1 page worth of strategies here. I'm going to go ahead and select direct instruction as one of the work plan strategies. And this is where I need to type in the purpose of the activity. And I'm just, for the purposes of this session, going to say purpose of the activity here. And obviously that's going to require more information. You can paste information in. Again, if you paste information in, not a bad idea to write that in a Word document or a Google Doc and then paste it in so that if there's an error on the web page, you don't risk losing the text that you've typed. Let's type sample rationale, scroll down, and evidence to measure. And this is where evidence to measure is entered. And I'll go ahead and hit save. With that done, I've just saved 1 work plan. You can enter up to 5 work plans by checking these checkboxes on each of the 4 pages. So there can be up to 20 different work plan strategies entered across these 4 different web pages. You must do at least 1 like I just did. The next tab over is the LEA plan upload. Now that was a question of I had checked that checkbox to say I had a second strategy, but I didn't save it, and the system's trying to make sure I don't lose data. And so I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I want to leave because I really didn't want to enter a second strategy. On this LEA plan, you can click this link to see the document on the AOE website where the required LEA plan template is. If you need to provide some description, in fact, you should provide some description of your plan here. Up to 5,000 characters, and then you can complete this upload process. And so I'm going to step through exactly how do you upload a file. You don't want to upload directly from Google Docs, but you can upload a Word doc, an Excel spreadsheet, or a PDF. And so when I've done this, so I clicked on that Browse button. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to pick on this Upload Test File. And now that's been copied up to my computer. I click the Upload button. That will actually bring that file into the server where the GMS runs, and this link right here is now that file that I selected. It can't be greater than 6 megabytes in size. You can upload multiple files, though, if you need to do that. Once you've uploaded a file, if you realize you need to upload a different version, you can select this checkbox and click Delete Selected Files, and now that file has been removed. It is a requirement that at least 1 file be uploaded, though. So I'll go ahead and do that, re-upload that file, click Save Page, and no error messages displayed, meaning that this has satisfied the minimum edits of the computer here. Now, before we move into completing the assurances and submitting the grant, now we need to switch into other application sections where the Chart of Accounts budgeting process is completed. If I open up this drop-down list, you'll see a different line, a different section for each one of the different budgets that need to be completed. So I click on IDEA Basic. Again, now we have a different tab structure for IDEA Basic. General information, just a little bit about what makes IDEA Basic different than the other sections of this application. Transfer to the consolidated school-wide pool is a function that we're required by law to make available to you. It's not by any means recommendation that you should do this, but it's a facility that the agency is required to make available. So for example, if you wanted to take any of the $281,000 remaining in the IDEA basic allocation and send it to the school-wide program, which is part of the CFP, you could enter that dollar amount into this field here, and those dollars would leave your IDEA application and go into your CFP consolidated school-wide pool. So again, not recommending that you do that, but it is an option that you can consider. I'm going to go ahead and click on the budget detail tab here, and again, because I had put a 0 in there, it said, do you really want to leave the page? And yes, I really do. So now I'm on the budget detail page. For this particular LEA, there are dollars that are available for budgeting has been reduced down by this $5,000 that was transferred out to the proportionate share budget. And so we have these line items here. Object codes, function codes, this is part of the chart of accounts information that the agency's been talking about that's coming, and this is what will ultimately be driving the reimbursement process when payments start happening in the summer here. So I select one of the valid object codes as salaries. You know, commonly with IDEA, we're going to be paying teacher salaries and teacher benefits, so I'm going to say salaries, and I'm going to pick on instruction, for example. Again, this is the list of valid function codes for the IDEA consolidated application sections for each of the different budgets that are available. So I'm going to pick on instruction, and I'm just going to enter teacher salaries. Now, exactly how much detail the program office wants is something that they can communicate separately. I'm simply showing what's required from a technical standpoint in the system. I've got $281,000. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say I want to budget $120,000 to teacher salaries. And similarly, if I'm paying that much in teacher salaries, I've probably got something out here for benefits as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and put benefits in there, teacher benefits, and we'll go ahead and put $25,000 on that line item. I scroll down to the bottom and I hit Save Page. Now it will show that I've budgeted $145,000 and that I have $136,000 remaining. If your district has an approved indirect cost rate, the process for computing indirect costs, what the maximum is, will display here in terms of taking indirect costs also out of that $281,000 if you'd like. In the test environment with this particular district, I don't have an indirect cost rate loaded right now. One of the other functions that's in here, if I can come down here and I'll pick on salaries, and I'll actually pick 2495 grant administration. If you're paying your, your grants administrator or some other similar function with programmatic funds, and that's an allowable use of funds, 2495 is the appropriate function code to be using there. I'm just going to type in the word test, and I'll put, $1 on that. Hit save. Ultimately, you want to be working towards budgeting as many of the funds as need to be budgeted. Some programs at the agency require that 100% of the funds available for budgeting be allocated, whereas other programs do not make that same requirement. The budget summary tab doesn't need to be filled out. This simply shows information about where did you budget your money. And I can see that of the money that I budgeted, 82% is currently in salaries and 17% is in benefits. With that part completed for the basic section, I'm going to switch into basic proportional share. They don't have a transfer to school-wide function, but they do have a budget detail page, and they only have that $5,000 that was available. Now, these are services that you're going to provide to the independent schools, not money you're paying to the independent schools. And so ultimately, I could come in here and I could say, well, is it purchase services or is it salaries? The same exact budgeting process that we just used for the IDEA basic program. And in fact, that exact same process needs to be completed for pre-K and pre-K proportionate share if you have independent schools attending independent school students at the pre-K level. And in this case, we had $400 earlier on. So that's the completion of the individual sections. Go back up to the consolidated level and now move into the assurances process. In the assurances page, when we clicked on assurances, it opened a sub-tab just like on the work plan. Program-specific assurances reads like a software license agreement. Check this checkbox at the top of the page. Only district superintendents will have a button at the bottom of the page that says, yes, I want to save this. And basically, we put another checkbox on the IDEA assurances that says, by checking this box, I read it, I accept it, I acknowledge it, I will agree to proportionate share funds and all of those pieces. And so you're making a legal agreement about the spending of your IDEA funds here. And so I'm going to click on Save Page. And then when I come into the assurances summary sub-tab, it will say, okay, well, you did your central data assurances, you did back on this program specific page, you did 2 different checkboxes, and here are their dates. Now, when I check on this legal entity agrees, that is doing the one and only one agreement of assurances that needs to be done for IDEA for all of FY19. So they put today's date, June 1st, into this, and that will be visible on the submit page. Right now on the submit page, it will actually show March 16th because that was when we only had central data assurances available, but you'll see the assurances date and then when you agreed to all programmatic and central data assurances. Next step is to run the consistency check. When I click on consistency check, it'll take a minute to think about what are the different errors that are out there with this application. I didn't have to, the system is not configured to require you to budget 100% of your funds, and so it came back with no errors, and as such, the superintendent, which I'm logged in as with that role, I have a button that's going to allow me to submit the application to the agency. When I click on that submit button, I get a message that says this has been submitted for review. Everything's locked. If I go back to the contact information page, I get a message that says it's been submitted. No more updates can be saved. The save buttons are gone. If you need it back, you've got to talk to the program staff of the agency so that they can return it back to you for changes. Messages out here about the history of the application. I ran a consistency check. I submitted it, and when did it actually go through the approval process? If you need to print a PDF copy of your application, come out to the application print page, select the checkboxes corresponding to the pieces of the application you would like to have built into a PDF, and click on Request Print. It will build this line that says, I requested a print on June 1st at 5 p.m., and when that print is completed, approximately within the next half hour, it'll show up as a link in the completed print job section and will stay out there for 1 week where you can download that PDF and then print that as needed within your own SU. Okay. Again, when your application is ultimately returned back for changes, right now it shows submitted for review status for the IDEA. This review summary button is where you'll be clicking this in order to open up your review checklist and see what comments the agency has made in the event that your application is returned for changes. Reminder that when you click on the review summary button, you need to disable your pop-up blockers for the GMS website so that the review summary and the review checklists can open in a distinct tab, browser tab, that is. That's about it for this expedited training section. Hopefully this complements well with everything that we talked about on May 15th when we did the original training section. Again, allocations for FY19 are out there live for IDEA, and the application submission due date for the IDEA consolidated application is coming up on July the 1st. Thank you very much for listening today.